Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this second in our 2026 From the Helm webinars from Haven Knox-Johnston. My name is Paul Knox-Johnston, and I am the Sales and Marketing Manager for Haven Knox-Johnston. And we've been hosting webinars now for quite a few years, and we've got some really interesting subjects out of there. Everything from lithium batteries to paint, from sailing around Britain to preparing for storms. And for the last 2 years, we have regularly partnered up with our friends at the Cruising Association, who have been very helpful in supplying speakers for us on fantastic subjects such as crossing the Channel and cruising North France, sailing with orcas, and just last month we had Martin Sutcliffe, a CA member, telling us all about his experience in single-handed offshore sailing. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Robin Barron. Robin is the current Cruising Association president, and as the Southwest England regional editor for the Cruising Almanac, extremely well qualified to talk to us about the Isles of Scilly. So, over to you, Robin.
Thank you very much, Paul. So what I'm going to do during this talk is hopefully whet your appetite for those of you who've never been to the Isles of Scilly, so that you want to go there, and give you some practical guidance on what you need to think about before you go and when you're there. And I'm guessing quite a large proportion of my audience have already been there at least once. And for them, I'm just hoping to rekindle the wonderful experience they probably had when they went there. So this is what I'm going to cover. Why bother going there? Where are they? How far away? And how to get there? Where to go once you get there? Some essentials, and what to do when you're in the islands. So, but before I do all that, I'm just going to give you a few slides to whet your appetite of pictures, photographs from the islands. And I'm not going to say where they are, I don't think. I am going to credit David Hackett for many of these photographs. David Hackett has written the IMRE publication Isles of Scilly, and I really recommend, if you're going, you have to take a copy of that with you. So this is pretty much a perfect day on the Isles of Scilly. The sky and the sea are blue, as you can see. There's hardly any wind, and the beaches are very white. So the islands, they are outstandingly beautiful, and they're unspoilt. There are about 140 islands, but only 5 are occupied. There are more than 300 named shipwrecks, and navigation and pilotage needs considerable care. But don't let that put you off, assuming you've got a fair degree of experience, because you'll be able to cope. So the climate is temperate oceanic, bordering on a humid subtropical climate. So it's the warmest place throughout the year within the UK. There's very little air pollution and more sunshine than most places. So it gives you very good clarity, as you can see from these photographs, but there's a greater risk of sunburn, so you need to cover up. Population is around 2,100, but it takes in about 125,000 tourists a year. And 85% of the economic activity in the islands is based around tourism. For those who don't know or would like to guess, this is Castle Briar I think it's on the west side of, or perhaps the north side of Briar. So why come? It's some of the most beautiful scenery in all England. It's got wonderful bird life. It's got wonderful spring flowers. And it's a wonderful cruising ground. Assuming you don't have awful weather, and we'll talk about weather a bit later on, you'll have a very good time here. Okay, so I think this is Old Grimsby again. Some of these boats are on moorings, but you can also anchor here. So let's start off with, where are the Isles of Scilly? So this chart that shows you. It's 188 miles from the Needle's entrance, which is for many of my viewers, I guess they're probably coming from the Solent. And you've got to make your way down channel. You can sail from Falmouth, which is about 60 miles, 63 miles. So that's a longish day. Or you can go round the Lizard and then moor or anchor off Penzance or Newlyn. And then you've got a passage of about 37 to 40 miles the next day. The other mileages are on there. It's 135 miles from Cork. If you're cruising to Ireland, there the Isles of Scilly are a lovely stopping off point, either on the way out or on the way back. It's 120 miles up to South Wales as well, or 100 miles across to Lefort. Many people include the Isles of Scilly in around the Western Channel cruise. The islands are surrounded by traffic separation schemes, but don't let that put you off, because there is not as much traffic. It's only really the north-south one off Land's End, which is on the right of the screen, which carries much traffic, and it's nothing like further east in the Channel or off Ushant. And so, coming from say Newlyn, you follow the coast. You pass probably outside the Runnelstone, and your rum line across the islands takes you north of the Wolf Rock. Relatively easy navigation. You're not having to do the tricky bits around Land's End. That bit is easy. The landfall can be tricky. You certainly don't want to be coming in the dark, certainly not for a first visit. So here are some landmarks on the way. The Runnelstone, which you've just seen, that's just south of the end of England, and looking across to the Longships Lighthouse, which marks the passage going north when they're going north to Ireland or around to North Devon or South Wales. Gwenup Head is the big headland just to the south of Land's End. And again, you've got the Longships in the background. And there's the Wolf Rock. And as I say, it's a very useful marker for the course, because you'll pass it on the rum line. So here we go again. So these are the places you've seen. The Runnelstone's here, Gwenup Head's here, and the Wolf Rock's here. And you were looking up the Longships here. You've got to deal with the traffic separation scheme, and if you dip into that, as you may do certainly on the south-going side, you'll need to be heading at right angles to the direction of you'll be heading true west, so you comply with the regulations. So these are the islands. So let me just point out, try and orientate you. So St Mary's here is the main island, and the port of the Hugh-town here is the main port, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's very much a mixed blessing, in my opinion. And the town is here on this isthmus, and you can also come and anchor south of the town in northerly winds here in Proth Cressa. This bit here across the middle, Crow Bar and Tresco Flats dries. So if you can and should go across that, but you need to go across with the tide up. Tresco is here, the most developed island. Tourism's really quite developed, some sophisticated, fairly sophisticated restaurants, and the Tresco Abbey Gardens to see. In contrast, Briar to the west here is much more rough and ready. Some people prefer it. I think I may do, actually. And there's Briar there. And then let me just point out, because we're going to look at it in a minute, St Helens Pool here. This is the only all-weather anchorage in the islands. And it was used by sailing ships in the past. And it has absolutely no facilities apart from shelter, and it's quite big, and so you probably need to anchor in the lee of one of the islands, depending on the wind direction. And then over here we have the fourth inhabited island, St Martin's. And finally, down here we have St Agnes, which the fifth inhabited island. Usually anchorage is the cove here, exposed to the south, but sheltered from the north. You can also anchorage in this passage here, but not so many people do that. And then again, for orientation, you've got the Western Rocks down here, and here's the Bishop Rock, and we'll hear a bit more about that in a minute. So Penninnis Head, let me go back. That's here. So what most people do, what I did the first time I came, and many years ago, is they would go to the main town, and you come in up St Mary's Sound, which is fine, and then you go round and come into St Mary's Harbour here, which is okay, and it's actually what you'll have to do if you're checking into the UK, as you may be doing if you're coming from Ireland or France. So here's Penninnis Head. Let me take you through it. You pass that to starboard, as this French yacht is doing, and you come round this breakwater and in here. Now this is another landmark for many people crossing. It's the Scillonian, which is the quite small ferry that brings all the passengers by sea to the island. There are also some helicopter routes and I think some fixed wing routes from various places on the mainland. But the Scillonian, if you go this year, I think it's due to be her last year, because they've ordered and will be commissioning a new ferry that will replace her. So you come around. I just want to show you where the anchorage is. So there is no anchorage. Where the moorings are, they're here, up here. And here you can see. And if you come in the school holidays, you'll be packed in. And if the wind is from the west and shifts a bit north, you'll be very exposed, which is why I don't really recommend going and mooring up in St Mary's. But you will need to go there if you need to load on water. If you can see on the inside of the breakwater here, roughly where my cursor is, there is a metered water supply. You have to put tokens in, which you buy from the harbour master. And you want to do that after 10:30, when all the tripper boats have left. And then you'll be able to get alongside the jetty. You should be able to get alongside the jetty and replenish your tanks. While you're ashore there are some nice facilities in St Mary's, a pleasant bar here. And here's Port Cressa, which, if you remember, this is to the south of Newtown. It's the inlet, and you can anchor here. Anchorages in the island are either sand, which Port Cressa is, so it's not terrific holding, or rock. I've been in here at night when with lots of boats anchored there, because it was a northerly wind, and as the night went on, various boats dragged out, and their crews had to be awakened by the sound of foghorns, at which point they usually got up, pulled up the anchor, motored, dropped it back exactly where they were with the same scope, and not surprisingly, they got the same result because they dragged again a bit later. All good fun. So this is Port Cressa here. So where would you go? Assuming you don't have to clear in, where would you go? Well, you can come in, if you're running late, you can anchor off to the east of the top end of St Mary's here overnight. No facilities, but you get shelter. Or you can do what I did the other year. You could come right round the top here, pass round Isle of Lighthouse, and come into Old Grimsby, or do the same thing and go into New Grimsby here. Or you could come and anchor in the cove here off St Agnes. So you've got plenty of choices. You won't want to spend more than one night if you decide to go to Hugh Town, you won't want to spend more than one night, I wouldn't have thought. And so on the next day, you'll probably go across to New Grimsby, across Tresco Flats with the tide. So here are some, I think this is a nice drone shot. You're looking across to Tresco with Briar in the background. Again, a very clear day. And then this is New Grimsby Harbour with Briar in the background. And these are mainly local boats. But the main anchorage is up here. We'll see another shot of that in a minute. Tresco Harbour Master, who will take your money. And this is viewed from the south, looking up. So this is Tresco on the right-hand side and Briar on the left, and you're looking up the anchorage there. You can see most of the boats are there. This is Cromwell Castle, and over here is Hangman's Rock. And actually, you can just, I think you probably just make out there's a few white horses out there to the north. And this is looking slightly differently from Briar. And again, you can see the throng of moored boats there. And this nice shot here of the sundown at Hangman Island. And again, from the north now, looking the other way, the moorings are here, and in the background, that's St Mary's, and this is over here is St Agnes. So we're looking south. And here's a shot now. You can see. So you moor to those mooring buoys, and you'll be charged for doing so. And I was describing coming across the flats from, if you come from St Mary's, and this is the route you take across here. You actually go that side, and then this is what happens if you get it wrong. He looks quite comfortable there, doesn't he? And then, as I said, you can come in from the north. This is the route I took a couple of years ago. Come right round the islands and come in from the north. So this is coming into Old Grimsby from the north. And this is a view of Old Grimsby and so on. Now, there are moorings again here, but you can also anchor. There's room to anchor. Another view of the moorings. And that's so just to orientate you again. This was New Grimsby over here, and this is Old Grimsby here on this side. And then this is going into the St Helens Pool I described, the only all-weather anchorage. And then St Martin's is the island to the east, not as busy as the other islands, probably because the anchorages are all a bit more exposed. There's the day mark to guide you, and there's the day mark, and this is the island here. This bay faces pretty much north. So we were here, looking across here. There are anchorages in the bay. And then coming down to St Agnes, that's here. This was the original lighthouse on the Isles of Scilly. It's still there, but it's no longer used because they built the Bishop Rock Lighthouse. And here's the pub in St Agnes. It's quite a good pub, serves food. If you want a pasty, you've got to order it. You can ring up by 11:45, whether you want it to eat in the pub or take away. Worth knowing, because you don't want to turn up there and not be able to have a pasty if that's what you want. So this is the bar between St Agnes over there and this smaller island called Goo, which covers at high water, and you get swirling water. And now I think this is taken from St Agnes looking west over the Western Rocks. And if you just look at my cursor, you can just make out the Bishop Rock light. Now, this is the scene of the worst peacetime maritime disaster in British naval history in 1707, when Admiral Sir Cloudesley Shovel led the fleet of 21 ships on passage from Gibraltar to the English Channel and managed to get amongst the rocks, or not all of them, but 4 of them did, with a loss of 2,000. And that gave rise to the Longitude Act of 1714, and which in turn gave rise to John Harrison's development of the chronometer to enable us to determine longitude. So the Bishop Rock out here was built in 1858. Previously, there'd been a lighthouse on St Agnes since 1680. So these are the Western Rocks. Quite frankly, you want to see these from afar. If you really want to see them, because there's lots of seals and stuff, you need to take a tripper boat from St Mary's, because they will go places you would never dare go with your yacht. And that's worth doing. This is the lighthouse. And here's the yacht who is coming in, but not, he's keeping off the rocks. But looking over to, these are the Western Rocks here, and you can see the Bishop appearing just above them. So one of the things to do is wildlife. Here are some seals on rocks, and my recommendation is, if you really want to get up close, you go on a tripper boat trip, for the reasons I've said, because you won't get as close as that in your yacht. Okay, so I should say a little bit about navigation. So the charts, many are based on Admiralty surveys carried out in the period between 1860 and 1904. There are some discrepancies on these charts to such an extent that Navionics commissioned their own recent survey. So I would recommend, if you're using electronic charts, you use the Navionic one, because they're probably, sorry, I'm jumping around here. They're more accurate. They're more up to date. Another tip: do not follow local boats. They will go places you don't want to go to. So what to do? The wildlife we talked about. The flowers on the island, certainly in the spring, are incredible. They have pilot gig racing in the summer. I think they have a pilot gig championship at some point, and that's all good fun. Now, I'm going to talk about the weather in a minute, but this is a rather salutary photograph, because if you look out to sea, it's a relatively calm day, but the swell somehow has got in, and it's coming into the north entrance to New Grimsby Sound. And this is the problem with the islands. If there is a swell, they aren't really big enough to give you sufficient shelter to get out of it. The swell somehow finds its way around, in which case your probably sensible course is to up anchor and head home, or not to be there in the first place. So what do you need if you're going to the Isles of Scilly? You need a good forecast. You need sound ground gear. There are no alongside mooring pontoons. The only time you're likely to go alongside is alongside the quay in St Mary's for provisioning and taking on fuel and water. You need a chain mooring strop to guard against chafe. You need a sound tender because you'll be using that to get ashore and back to your boat. And again, you need a good forecast. I can't overemphasize the fact that this is not a place where you take a chance and say it'll probably be all right, because it probably won't be. Also highly desirable, full tanks, provisioned up, and using the correct nomenclature. So it's referred to as Scilly, or the Isles of Scilly, not the Scillies or the Scilly Isles. Last time I looked, the Scilly Isles were a pair of roundabouts in Esher. And so what to do? I've touched on some of these. The beaches are amazing. So beaches, swimming, walking is lovely. You can walk on all the islands. Visit the Abbey Gardens on Tresco. They're full of tropical and semi-tropical plants. Well worth visiting. Visit the Western Rocks by trip a boat. So birds, seals, wildflowers I've dealt with. Watch the gig racing. And above all, slow down. If you're lucky with the weather, you'll have a fantastic time. A little bit of plugging here. So the navigation, the pilot books. So David Hackett's book, from which many of these photographs were taken. On the left here is very well recommended. You can buy it from Imre. And the Cruising Almanac, whereas Paul said, I edit Southwest England, and including the Isles of Scilly. If you had that on board and suddenly had the opportunity to go to the Isles of Scilly, but without buying a specialist pilot book, you could do it pretty safely, actually. And then charts. So on the left here, we've got the Admiralty Small Craft Folio, which is terrific, but they ceased production in 2021. So you'll be running on an out-of-date chart, still better than nothing. If you want an up-to-date paper chart, your only choice is Imre, and they do a folio for the West Country, which includes the Isles of Scilly. And then in terms of electronic charts, as I've mentioned, Navionics, they did this survey a few years ago. And so that's very helpful. I'm drawing the presentation to a close in a minute. I would like to thank Imre, the RCC Pilotage Foundation, and David Hackett for permission to use photos and plans, and the Cruising Association for permission to use images from Captain's Mate. I think I'm now going to say a little bit about the CA. So we've got a worldwide community of about 6,400 members, purely aimed at cruising and providing support to our members and the wider cruising community. The members enjoy access to lots and lots of cruising information, some specialist knowledge on technical and regulatory things, and the opportunity to socialize with other members. We have sections covering many, many cruising areas, and they arrange meetings both through the winter and on the water in the summer. So if you are interested in enhancing your cruising, the CA is a very good way to do it. I think I've mentioned most of these. We have a headquarters in London with some accommodation as well. If you are interested, just get in touch with the Cruising Association. So that's pretty much it. I'm giving the usual navigational disclaimer here. This is guidance, it's not advice. Great, so I think that's me for the moment, and I think it's over to Paul again to deal with questions. Or handle the questions. I'm going to answer them. I'm going to answer them. Paul's going to manage them.
Brilliant. All I say is thank you very much, Robin. That was amazing. So much information in there. I hope everybody gets a chance to take them down and do go out to the Scillies. I do understand, although I haven't been there myself, I do understand it's a stunning part of the world. So thank you very much for all the information you've shared with us. There have been some questions coming in. Our first one is from Ian Ward, What islands or towns can you go ashore to get fresh water and diesel from?
Really, the answer to that is only St Mary's on the mainland. In the harbour I described during the talk. And you need to, as I said then, you want to wait till after 10:30 when all the tripper boats have gone off for their day trips, because before that it's pandemonium.
And I think we're going to cover off sort of three questions in one here from Richard and an anonymous person. Is they have where Richard has an OVNI 385 lifting kill yacht and can dry out. Where are the best places or beaches to dry out for both visiting interesting places ashore and also for peace and quiet, I suppose, as well? And yeah, from a lifting kills perspective, does that give you a different perspective, or open up a whole new load of new avenues for you?
I think it does. I mean, there's the shallow. I mean, I've got a fixed keel yacht, so I haven't done this, but you could dry out on Tresco flats if you wanted to in an OVNI. It doesn't. I don't think it gets you into any better harbours than you can with a fixed keel yacht. It might get you slightly better shelter because you get further in. But yeah, good. Okay, let me just add something to the answer to the first question. You can also buy provisions on some of the other islands, on St Agnes and on Tresco and on Briar, probably. Nothing great, but you won't starve. Yeah. Have I answered the question about drying out? I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think there are other options, but yes, but it doesn't.
I have to say, I haven't seen many boats drying out there. It's not like North Brittany where lots of boats dry out, but you could do it. I'm thinking it would give you a different angle.
And Martin has asked, if arriving from France, what checking in do you need to do other than the border force forms?
I think you can do it online now. I thought of that as I said it. I think if you only have UK citizens on board, you can probably check in by doing the online form, and nobody will bother you. And then I think you've got to ring up, and they'll say you're cleared, and you can take your yellow down. But if it's more complicated, you may have to go in, because you've got foreign nationals on board. You may need to go into St Mary's, and there is a customs officer there, I think, or the harbour master acts as a customs officer, and he will deal with what's needed.
I was going to say, as a customs officer, what a lovely place to be based. Tess has asked, thank you so much. Whilst I know, of course, you cannot be categorical, but they're planning a trip out there end of September, early October. Do you think that's too late?
It's quite dark then. That's the first thing. You've got much more darkness then than if you go June or July. You've got 16 hours of daylight, 17 hours of daylight, which improves the cruising immensely. I wouldn't go. I don't think I'd go out at the end of September. I wouldn't go out on my own boat. You could go on the ferry. You should go in the summer. And June and July are fine, but the French yachts come after Bastille Day, and the English schools holidays, everything fills up. So I would say June and the first half of July would be the absolute tops. And I'm not sure I wouldn't go at the end of September, I don't think.
And someone's just asking if you confirm the only place to get fuel and water is St Mary's. I think you've confirmed that, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
And Matthew's asked, what's the weather forecast to look out for? Which is the one that makes you think leave at once?
Something above a 5, I think, probably. 6, because it's going to blow a 6 for a couple of days. You ought to worry a bit. If that's assuming you're already there. If it's a 5, you might have said, yeah, I think you can get. I think I've got there in a 5. That's all right, but it's the usual thing, because then it will bring the swell in, and you'll be very uncomfortable, either on your mooring or at anchor.
And what Richard has asked, what's it like going through Crow Sound?
Well, it's fine. You've got transits. You've got you pick your time. You go through probably just before high water, and you've got transits, and you stick to the transits, and you'll be fine. It's quite dramatic particularly when you go the next day and see all the tides run away and where you went.
That's quite scary sometimes. Imagine when you look back
Best to
on
do it. Best to do it that way round, not to look at it first and then go to
it. Robert's asked, are mooring buoys available for visitors at both Old Grimsby and New Grimsby harbours?
I think there are. The New Grimsby is pretty much all mooring buoys now, and they're in great demand. Old Grimsby, which personally I prefer, it has some mooring buoys, but if they're all gone, you can anchor, or you can just choose to anchor, and that's fine, I think.
And Jim's asked about, for an Irish boat, what is the procedure for checking into the Isles of Scilly? Is it similar to the UK, or is it?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I mean, we're all terribly. The Irish are very relaxed about British boats coming to them. I think the British they probably want you to check in, but yeah, you can probably fill in an online form actually.
Are there any more moorings? This is from Richard. Are there any more moorings aside from in the sounds around Tresco and St Mary's? I think we've just answered that about Grimsby, but anywhere other than...
Well, there's the moorings in St Mary's Harbour, and then there are the moorings in New Grimsby and Old Grimsby. There may be one mooring, I think, off the hotel on St Martin's, but there's nothing at St Agnes, I don't think.
And Charles has asked, having been on the islands during quiet times, how do you pay mooring fees on the trots of New and Old Grimsby?
I think there's you go to the New Inn on Tresco and can pay them there, which is it's the pub. It's not a big island. None of these islands are terribly big. The New Inn is in the middle of the island. You almost certainly walk past it and almost certainly go in and have something to drink, I would have thought. So you just pay there.
Sounds pretty good solution to me.
Yeah, everything's pretty relaxed, actually.
Jim Hughes has sort of helped out on the drying out thing. Apparently Green Bay on Briar is a go-to place for drying out.
Yes, it is. That's right. Yeah. The other side, that's opposite Tresco. Yeah. There are boats there, but you see bilge keelers are kept on moorings there and dry out every time. He's right.
And on the other end of the scale, what are the best anchorages with a 1.8 meter draft?
Well, they're all good for that. They're all good. New Grimsby, Old Grimsby, St Agnes, the anchorage is fine. Yeah, that 1.8 you'll be fine. Pretty much anywhere. Up to probably 2.1, 2.2. You pick your spot.
And Nick Bacon, I think it's a very similar question, but he says, excellent talk, thank you. So I'll throw that one in for you.
Yeah.
He draws 2 meters. What's the depth at high water going over the Tresco flats from St Mary's up to Tresco, or is it best to go around the outside and back in from the north?
I think you'll have to check, but you're probably all right unless it's a very neat tide. You'll be all right at high water, 2.2 meters. Yeah.
What are the anchoring rules in marine conservation zones for the 12-meter sailing boats? From Bertrand.
I've not been told of any. I'm not aware of any restrictions in the Isles of Scilly on anchoring. But there's an island to the west of St Agnes, Annette, which is a bird sanctuary. You can't go near that. But you wouldn't want to, and you wouldn't want to anchor down there anyway. The Isles of Scilly, you've got to think of them. This is a group of islands in the western approaches, surrounded by the Atlantic. You're very, very exposed, and that's why the warning about the weather. So and that's why you've got to get good shelter when you anchor. You've got to make sure there's land between you and the prevailing wind. The wind prevailing on that day, I mean.
Yeah.
When you're there. Yeah.
And Tess has asked, what's the tidal range? Again, interested for drying out. A lot of people drying out.
Well, I don't know. It's not huge. It's not like the Channel Islands. I'm trying to look as we go. Ask me another question. I'll come back to that.
What's the best shelter area with wind coming from the west, from Stefan?
Oh, well, either Old Grimsby or New Grimsby or St Agnes, the anchorage down there. They're well sheltered. Yeah, also I guess St Martin's Bay, which we saw there at the end. But you're fairly isolated there. But
quite sheltered.
Yeah, you're sheltered. You've got land. You've got a lump of land between you and the wind. Yeah.
What and Noel is asked, what are your key weather needs to make the trip and the time to allow for it? Oh, key weather needs to make the trip and the time to allow for it. Sorry. So how long will it take you to get there? And
Well, if you go in stages, as I suggested, and you can either do a long stage from Falmouth with 63 miles, I think, or you could go into Mounts Bay and go from Penzance or Newlyn, which will get it down closer to 40 miles. So that's a day sail along. But both those are 63 miles a long day sail. 43 miles is a shorter day. So you need a day, but you need to know the weather once you get there. The next day and the day after that are pretty settled too.
And Stephen has asked, are there any marine engineers in the Isles of Scilly? Case of breakdown.
Well, there must be in St Mary's because there are all the tripper boats that must have marine engineering needs. If you needed one, you'd ask the harbour master. He'd know where to go. He's also the Cruising Association honorary local representative, so we deal with him quite a lot on local knowledge and stuff.
And that's one of the great joys of the Cruising Association. You've got sort of people in most sort of ports.
Yeah.
An anonymous one is sailing south of Wolf Rock advised from Helford.
You can do, but you're probably going out of your way. Wolf Rock is an isolated rock, so it can be approached quite close on all sides. So whether you go north or south, it's up to you. I mean, if you're attacking and you had to go south, that's fine.
And I think we've kind of covered this off. May a good time to go? And do you need cash for the harbour master, or do they take card now?
May is a very good time to go. Yeah, and I think I use cash to buy the tokens for the water in the harbour, but he might have taken. I don't know if we would have taken a card for that. He might have done. Most people take cards, don't they now?
Yeah. Yeah. And Les Collier has asked, have you found that it is the high season moorings and anchorages are in the high season moorings and anchorages are in high demand?
Yeah, there is, but you'll always find somewhere there. I mean, for example, if you were going to New Grimsby, which is pretty much now all moorings, you might well find you can't get a mooring, but you could go around to Old Grimsby and you could anchor. Yeah, I wouldn't. It'll be busy in English school holidays and post Bastille Day because the French love to come over and stay there, possibly on their way to Ireland, or possibly turn around and go home again. But those are the busy period, 14th of July to the end of August.
And a personal one from an anonymous. What is your favourite place to anchor? All other things being sorted.
I'd probably go for Old Grimsby. Yes, it's got lovely views and it's relatively peaceful.
And I mean, there's a few questions coming about moorings now. Is like how much do they charge for the moorings, and can you book them in advance?
No, I don't think you can book them in advance because they have no system for that. I'm guessing they won't be cheap. The ones in Tresco, I'm guessing. I don't know this year's rates. I'm guessing between 20 and 30 quid a night. But not nothing.
And I know that's for the mooring boys, but are there also people who come out if you're anchored to charge it, or is that?
I'm not sure they can. No, I don't think they can. You're anchored. But that may be the answer then.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So that's got that one. Lifting killboats we've answered. Oh. Another one. How many places are there to eat, and your favourite restaurant?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, so places to eat. I can't. In Hugh-town, the main town, I can't speak for that. On Tresco, there are a couple of. There's a cafe. There's a new inn, and there's a restaurant on the Old Grimsby side. All of those are okay. On Briar, there'll be various cafes and things that will be good. And on St Agnes, there's the pub, as I described. Where's my favourite? Probably the restaurant in Old Grimsby again, actually, of all the places. But there's a very upmarket supermarket on Tresco too. For the Tresco, the owner of Tresco had an expensive divorce about 20 years ago, and so he sold off a lot of properties on timeshare. So there's very well-to-do timeshare people come, rather like yachts people, and they like, when they're on holiday, they like good food. So there's a very well-stocked supermarket. It's not cheap, but you get what you want probably.
That's always good to know. And Andrew Kinnear has asked, what is the passage like from North Cornwall? I don't think we covered that off. They're coming from St Ives.
From St Ives?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't done it. You'd probably go across north of the traffic separation zone, I think, and then cut south. So you go north of, trying to find a chart here. I think that's probably all right. I think what's really tricky, if you're coming from, say, further up Padstow or South Wales, to get the timing right for the tides. But coming from St Ives, I'm guessing you've got a 40-mile sail across to the Isles of Scilly. It's about the same as from Newlyn. Yeah, I think that would be all right. You need to plan it out, obviously. Yeah, but I think it could be done.
Now, I know we've covered off you can't book the moorings in advance, but do you call ahead? Do you get someone up on the VHF and call ahead to be allocated one, or is it just coming?
No, yeah, first come, first serve. I mean, I think they might laugh at you if you called ahead. I'm looking here. Right, there's St Ives. Yes, you're coming south. Yes, you've got to go across the middle of the traffic separation scheme, and you go north of the Seven Stones, and then come in to the north of the islands. So quite doable, I think.
Pete Hicks has said at Neeps it's 4.2 meters at high water and low water is 2 meters. There you go.
So you've got 2.2 meters. Yeah. Yeah.
And Andy's asked a question, and this is quite a good one. In that, how do you describe how much experience do you think someone would need to sail out to the Scilly Isles, or is it something? I know you not just step on a boat and get on and do it, but do you think there's a level of experience required?
Yes. Yeah, you could freak yourself out, I think, if you hadn't. I mean, I went my second season, but I was young and foolish, so I'm not sure. And I had good weather. I had reasonably good weather. Yeah. So I mean, I was lucky. But if it's blowing a force 6, you're not going to go. Just not. And if it's forecast to force 6, you'd be silly if you go. Enjoy Cornwall in that situation, and wait if you've got the time.
Beautiful place to go sailing, Cornwall. I have to be honest. And Matt has asked, have they got their own currency like the Channel Islands?
No.
No. So it's just normal UK pounds and
yeah. London prices, but otherwise.
And how long would you recommend going for sailing from Penzance? 1 week, 2 weeks? Would you say?
I've done it again when I was not quite as young and not quite as foolish, but I did do a 2-week cruise from the Solent there and back. But we had good weather. You've got to get on to get down there. You've got to get down there in three days, sort of thing. And then I had probably 5 days there, and then came back. It's a bit longer than most of us are used to. It's longer than a trip across the Channel Islands or Cherbourg, for example. But I think you could do it in 2 weeks. 3 weeks, you certainly can, but you could have a 3-week cruise and be completely held up by the weather and prevented from going. And there are quite a lot. You talk to people, and there are quite a lot of people say, I've never got there because I've tried twice and I've never got there. So that's how it is.
And from that, if you do decide to go out there for an extended period, let's just say you want to stay there, how easy is it to reprovision? I know we mentioned there's a supermarket in one.
You're right. It's okay. It's okay. You'll pay. You won't. it won't be cheap food. It won't be Aldi or Lidl. It'll be, it'll be more expensive, but you can do it. You can do it on St Mary's in town, or you can do it from the shop on Tresco, or bits and pieces from other shops on St Agnes. I think there's a little shop on St Martin's, and there might be something on Briar. Yeah, you'll be fine. But yeah, it's best to provision up. Best to start off, not to go there hungry.
Don't turn up thinking you've just walked into the first pub and have a.
Well, you could do. If you go to Tresco, you can go in the New Inn and have a couple of pints and a meal. That should be fine. But you may not want to do that every day.
And another question that comes in is there, if you're out in the Scilly Isles and you need to return to the mainland for any reason, is there somewhere you can leave the boat for a longer term, or
not really safely? I was once renting on Tresco, renting a property, and the tenant who followed me in, I got talking to him, and he'd come out in his motorboat, and the weather was quite not nice at all. And I said, "Where's your boat?" "It's on a mooring." I said, "Well, this bad weather coming in. What are you going to do?" He said, "That's why I've got insurance." Which isn't what you want to hear, Paul, but that was his attitude.
I've suddenly got a bit.
That was his attitude. I won't give you any names, but that struck me as a bit. You're supposed, the insured is supposed to act as if they're uninsured, aren't they? That's the guiding principle. Yeah. Well, he wasn't doing that, I'm afraid. Yeah, the answer to the question is there is nowhere you can leave a boat. You can get yourself off. Yeah. You can get yourself off, but you'd be silly to leave a boat. You can't. I don't think there's any way you could safely leave a boat. You can be back in a day. You can be back to mainland in a day. So that's what you'd have to do in the event of an emergency.
I mean, one of the questions coming is, will my insurance cover me to sail to the Isles of Scilly? And the answer, this is probably one for me really, but the answer for that one is to just check your cruising range. I mean, if you've got UK and coastal waters of the UK, then you should be covered to go to the Scilly Isles. And if you've got UK and north coast of France, European waters, you should also be okay to cover. So just check your cruising range when you go. Are there any strong currents to be aware of?
There are tidal currents, and they're a little bit of a mystery. I don't think anybody's quite worked out what's going on. It's again, the islands they're in a much bigger system. They're in the western approaches, and so the influence of the land on the tidal current varies, I think, which is why it's not charted as well as you'd hoped.
Some more advice here. There from Les. There is a fish and chip shop on St Martin's, but you have to pre-order, preferably the day before, because the owner only catches enough fish on the day for the customers he has. Thank you, Les.
Very useful. Yeah, top tip.
Very good. And Anonymous has come in with, what is the Turks head on St Agnes like? Is it good to anchor in cove on St Agnes?
Most people you'd anchor the other side in Proth, what's it called, Port Cressa. So you've got to the south of the island, and then you can walk ashore to the Turks Head. If you go there, you'll find all the boats are anchored on the south, probably, but there may be one or two in Port Conga.
We'll come. There are three more questions. We'll just cover these three off, and I think we've probably exhausted all the information out of you. I think. The first one from Andrew is asking, do you know of any sort of cruises in company that sort of start and go over, so people go over in a sort of in a flotilla sort of thing? Do you know anything?
No, I don't think there are any organised ones. A club might do it, but it's not really flotilla cruising country or sea, really, because if it blows up, every boat's for itself, isn't it? It's not like the Greek islands in the summer where mostly you'll get by. I wouldn't, if you had a club, you might go to a cruising company with a club who say, provided you've got a couple of experienced people and they're willing to look after the less experienced.
And Bertrand has come back. I have read on the IFCA website that an integral part of these sites are the voluntary measures which have been agreed within the marine conservation zone boundaries. These include no diving for shellfish or any other marine species, anchoring restrictions for vessels over 10 meters. It concerns several zones in the Isles of Scilly. Did you know about that, or did?
I know there are some, yes, but not the one. I don't think it doesn't affect the main anchorages I've mentioned, I don't think. And he's right to mention that. And they will be, if you've got an up-to-date chart, they'll be marked on, it should be marked on the chart, these restricted areas. They won't be on the small ship, the Admiralty small craft folio from 2021, because they'll post-date that.
And in the event of damage to a prop shaft, is there somewhere to lift out? A good question.
I think, well, there are cranes in St Mary's for unloading the goods ship that comes in. They might be able to lift you out. They'd certainly be able to dry you out somewhere.
Oh, so it might be drying against the
wall, the wall or something. Yeah, they should be able to.
Well, I've got to say, Robin, that's probably the most questions we've got through on one of these webinars before. So that was good. It was almost like quick fire round in there in a minute.
Yeah,
but,
well, I hope it was helpful. And there was some good. There was, I'm not the fount of all knowledge. There was some useful knowledge and comments from people, wasn't there?
Oh, hugely, and we always say that there's no such thing as a silly question. If you're thinking about it, someone else will be as well. So it's always good to answer these questions. But it's all that's kind of left for me to say really now is a huge thank you for your time, Robin, and for sharing your knowledge with everybody on the call. I think it's been a really valuable experience, and hopefully people will take this away and go and visit.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Yeah, very rewarding.
Don't hit your mooring, that's all right then.
No, but very rewarding. Very rewarding if you can do it.
Brilliant. Okay. So all I can say is thank you for everybody for attending. Thank you for your time, Robin. A huge thank you for that. And I'll let you get back to the rest of your evening. So thank you very much.
Thanks everybody.